I'm willing to bet anything that this movie was originally going to be called The Wire, but the lack of gangsters might have thrown off some people. Hey everyone, David here back again with a movie review, which is generally what I'm supposed to do, but lately, I'm not gonna say good movies haven't been out. I'm so overdue to go see The Martian. Hopefully one of these days I have some free time to go catch The Martian, but it's a little too late to review that because with movies, you gotta be on top of that. So I managed to catch this one Thursday night, early screening, and it was between this and Pan, and it's almost like a calling, like the towers called Philippe Petit. I got a call from IGN telling me that maybe you should go with The Walk rather than Pan. So I went with this movie. So here I am to review The Walk, which is Robert Zemeckis' latest film ever since Flight back in 2012, and it tells the story about Philippe Petit, this tightrope walker from Paris, who all of a sudden sees the towers in this advertisement in a newspaper and says, you know what, that's where I need to perform my next act because I just feel this drive within me to do this. So with his help of his friends both in Paris and in America, he pulls off this outstanding feat, but will he be able to cross between the void of the two World Trade Center towers? And that's where the first conundrum comes into play when you're telling a story that is based on a true story. Even if you stretched a couple of things here and there that may or may not have been true, and I'll tackle that more head on later on in this review, when you're centering around a true story that's rather perilous and dangerous, and you're supposed to keep audiences at the edge of their seat wondering if they're going to make it out alive, but then you deal with a subject matter that's based on a true story, people might not get the same kind of reaction if they know the full story. I'm not gonna tell you straight up how this actually ended up in real life. I mean, chances are you could just go on Google and look it up, and therefore you'll know. But I will warn you, that kind of takes away from it. So if you're very fresh on the subject, I say stay fresh if you're willing to go see this movie. That way you're kept at the edge of your seat just as much as this movie is intending for you to be. And I feel like the movie, to a degree, succeeded at doing that because I really did enjoy this movie quite an awful lot. I can best describe this movie in being divided into two parts. The movie's about 2 hours long, solid 2 hours, so the first hour or so deals with Philippe Petit and his comeuppings and him figuring out why he loves doing this, and us getting the idea of why Philippe Petit loves to walk this tightrope and risking life and limb to just walking from literally point A to point B, and seeing where that all stemmed from, plus meeting some of the supporting characters that are going to help him perform this amazing task. And one of those characters is Annie, practically his girlfriend, played by what I perceive is probably a new-coming actress. I've never seen her in anything else before, so I'm guessing she's new to the scene, but I'm looking forward to seeing if she pops in here and there in some more projects because she was really good. Her name was Charlotte Le Bon. If I looked up her name, that's a pretty big deal. But her and Joseph Gordon-Levitt had very good chemistry and both gave really spectacular performances, and giving some props to JGL for pulling off a convincing I was about to say British French accent and portraying this character. I really did believe it. And again, the first hour deals with him and his internal struggles as to why he loves to do that. And they really did a good job at trying to get us to understand why he loves walking the rope so much. But it's in the second half, the second hour, where things pick up since our characters make the big move to New York. He meets his American friends that are going to help him get inside the World Trade Center so that they can put this wire between the two towers. And the movie almost becomes like a heist movie, except they're not trying to steal anything. In fact, the opposite, they're trying to put something there, which is the wire. And after that, we then begin with the last, half an hour, well, not half an hour, but more so the last 20 minutes of the movie is all this giant act of Philippe trying to walk this wire, and then the different acts he performs in between, because he doesn't just walk. He's like, no, that's not just all that I'm gonna do. So it is here where the movie definitely picks up, and I'm not saying it was slow before, but here is where for me, it was just a tad bit more interesting than the first half. Even though the first half was still pretty good, it was more so the second half of them trying to wiggle their way through the World Trade Center, avoiding anything that will potentially get them caught. And then the actual act of Philippe walking the tightrope is very exhilarating. Some of the best CGI you're going to come across these days, and the 3D really did pay off because there's this humongous depth of field. I didn't see it in IMAX 3D like the marketing is trying to promote this movie that you should see it in that format. The nearest IMAX theater for me is about 45 minutes away, and I was like, it's the walk. I don't feel the need to drive that far for the walk. I mean, maybe for, you know, like James Bond next month or the Hunger Games, sure, but I was like, no. Okay, so I went for a regular size theater, but I did manage to see it in 3D, and there are certain shots where I flinched, and ever so often there was a shot that felt just a little gimmicky where they're like flickering something at the screen so that they take advantage of the 3D. But at least Robert Zemeckis, the director, knew ahead of time that, hey, we're going to do this in 3D. We're not just going to convert it, but we are going to include these shots that are going to take advantage of the 3D, considering the technology is practically everywhere these days. And we're going to make this very dizzying image. And if they went for vertigo, they got it. I don't get vertigo easily. I didn't get dizzy, but there were a couple of shots where I'm like, oh my god, that really does look so far. And I really did get the emotion behind Philippe finally seeing the towers in person, and how he's like, you know what, on second thought, I think I changed my mind. He literally has a scene where he's like, I don't know about this. But what also made the second half work is that besides that, this humongous Daredevil act, them trying to figure out the statistics of how everything works, how, you know, what they're going to need to support the wire is very interesting. They could have easily made it boring, but let's just say that after finishing this movie, I legitimately want to look up this man's story. In fact, there's this documentary that won Best documentary feature back in 2009, I believe, that's called Man on Wire, which is about the same exact subject and the same man behind it. And I'm actually curious to check that movie out to see if there were any things that were exaggerated, which chances are there were, because ever so often there's something happens in the movie that I'm like, did that really happen? I don't know for certain because I haven't looked up the full story, but if a movie that is meant to be a biopic leaves me wanting to look up more about the subject, that means it did its job right. The movie, however, does have its problems. Like I said, some things here and there may have been created just for the sense of drama, so, you know, because it's a movie, some things need to be exaggerated, so I'm well aware that some things in this movie didn't exactly happen in real life, and maybe when I look up the full story, I'll find out what exactly was exaggerated, but I will admit some of those did create some thrilling moments, especially when they're setting up the wire. Other instances, however, I felt like they felt a little bit too Deus Ex Machina for me, and if you're not familiar with the term, that's when a protagonist is in a very perilous situation or a very dire situation, and they're about to either get killed or get caught or do something, but then something outside of their control, some other external force, saves them in the nick of time. And you see this in plenty of movies, plenty of action-driven movies, superhero movies, that kind of thing. And it happens ever so often here, and I was kind of hoping that they would work their way around that, because up until the point the movie was going for a realistic approach, but then it did Ex Machina here and there, so that did happen from time to time. But for me, the biggest issue with the movie is that some of the side characters are either unnecessary or were very likable but didn't exactly get some screen time. There were some characters here who I was enjoying seeing on screen, like this character here. I can't remember Barry. His name is Barry, played by Steve Valentine. I've seen him in other stuff. And then we got this character here who was played by James Badge Dale, who I saw in Iron Man 3 and The Lone Ranger. He was also pretty cool. He was interesting. And then we got his left-hand man here, who he meets in Paris, his photographer. All these different characters look like they could have been interesting, well-rounded, three-dimensional characters, but I feel like some of their scenes ended up on the cutting room floor somewhere. And then on the other end, we got some characters that I felt like, you know how I mentioned that some things were added for drama, and then ever so often, a movie that's based on a true story, a biopic or something like that, will actually cut something out because they didn't fit in, or because there wasn't enough, there were some pacing issues, or maybe it made the movie a little too long. They do that ever so often with true story movies. I feel like they needed to do that with a couple of characters in this movie that were kind of annoying. Like, they were in the movie, and I'm like, why are these guys here? One of them is a humongous stoner stereotype that it's almost like the movie realized how annoyed I was in real time, that even the movie goes, okay, you know, I can tell you're sick of this guy, let's go ahead and get rid of them. And they actually get rid of these characters, but why even have them in the movie in the first place? I feel like they could have been snipped, not just in the editing room, but way back in the screenplay stage, because that's where it all started. And I don't know why they were necessarily here. I mean, talk about adding things or taking away things so like it could feel much more of a Hollywoodized experience of what happened in real life. I felt like they could have done that with a couple of characters here. That way they could make room for more of these other characters that definitely deserve the screen time. But fortunately, there's one character who got plenty of screen time, and this character is not necessarily a human one. And of course, I'm talking about the World Trade Center itself. You know, it's kind of surreal seeing the World Trade Center recreated with CGI and a few actual sets constructed to kind of mimic how the World Trade Center looked back in 1974 when they were barely about to put the finishing touches on it. And obviously, in the year that we're in, watching this movie, knowing what happened in 2001, it's very surreal seeing these. It's almost like if I was to go and watch a Robin Williams movie knowing that the guy's gone. I honestly felt like that. And these are buildings. These are inanimate objects. But because of what they represented, this movie not only became a documentation of what Philippe Petit was trying to achieve with his daring act, but by the end of the movie, I realized that Robert Zemeckis was not only trying to tell that tale, but he was also trying to pay tribute to the World Trade Center and kind of write a love letter to them, because the movie almost acknowledges that with its few closing moments. It kind of realizes that it's not just about Petit, but it's also about these two towers and what they symbolized for not just the city of New York, but also the country itself. And let's just say that the last line in this movie definitely resonated with me. And I love that they did it in a way where it wasn't too on the nose. They could have easily made Petite, you know, through a voiceover say, and then 2.5 decades later, those buildings were no more, or something like that. And they could have just been straightforward with it, but instead the last line just encapsulated it very well, because it kind of foreshadowed what was unfortunately going to transpire 27 years later. But they did it in a very tasteful manner. So I have to give humongous props to Robert Zemeckis, the writers, and everybody involved for treating the two towers with respect. So just as much as the actual act that Petit performed himself, I feel like the movie is a balancing act of its own, balancing out the thrills and the excitement of that last hour of trying to set up the water as well as walk alongside it, while at the same time giving us great performances from Gordon-Levitt as well as Charlotte Le Bon and some of these supporting characters that I just wish could have had some more screen time, because it could have given the movie better value, better quality if these characters were to have more screen time and made us like them even more and give us the sense of camaraderie among the team that I was starting to feel early on in that second half. But nevertheless, the movie left me feeling good, let me feel inspired about what Petit was trying to achieve, as well as made me feel somber about the fact that the two towers were the two, both literally and figuratively, the two supporters of not just this event, but also this movie. So for that, I give The Walk a high 8 out of 10. So, let me know what you guys thought of the movie. Will you be willing to watch it? But if you're looking for a much more documented version and slightly shorter by about 30 minutes, there is a documentary called Man on Wire, which is about the same subject. And it won Best Documentary back in 2009, I believe. And so, if you're willing to check that out, there is that. But if you're looking for something that's a tad bit more glamorous, but at the same time, very well made and very well meaning, Hollywoodized version of that, you got The Walk. Definitely recommended. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.